I think everyone is appreciates the supply chain a whole lot more
Yeah.
than they did a year and a half ago. And I've seen a few industries kind of back off the pressure for, it used to be low price, low price, low price.
Yep.
Suddenly now it's more, is it a good value?
The Industrial Sage Executive Series, sharing the stories behind game-changing executives, their organizations, and insights into today's industry challenges.
Hello and welcome to today's Industrial Sage Executive Series interview. I am joined by Paul Conrath, who is the president of Custom Control Sensors. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Well, Paul, this is not your first rodeo with us. This is the second one. So we have you did an interview with you a couple years ago, and I think this is before we actually had the executive series. So excited to have you back and learn more about you and about your company, Custom Control Sensors.
Well, it's a thrill to be back, and thank you very much for remembering me and inviting me back.
Well, I'm excited to jump into it, learn more about you. We were, talking about some stuff, in the pre-show here, which I think is going to be very interesting. So, but before we kind of really, get into everything, just maybe if you could just let me know, or I know, but the audience, who Custom Control Sensors are. Like, who are you guys? What do you guys do? What's your history?
Sure. We're a 60-year-old company that has developed, designed, introduced pressure and temperature switches and sensors, mainly into the aerospace, defense, and industrial markets around the world. We have global markets, and almost every kind of plane has our products on it. Lately, we've been introducing new technology, new types of sensors onto especially aerospace, but same with industrial. We're out here in California, which is our main location. But we operate around the world, so it's a global company. It makes it kind of fun.
Excellent. Well, I guess we're going to get into this here in a little bit more, but yeah, I guess before we really kind of, dive a little bit more into the business and challenges that you're solving, this is the kind of the time that we'd want to kind of get to know you a little bit better. And learn, sort of how you ended up as president here. How did you end up with CCS? How did you end up in the engineering space? Take us back.
Okay, yeah, and it's funny, you given me some homework to do before we got together, and it did make me think on things I never really thought much about. I'm a Midwesterner, and one day, I was filling out a form to go to school, and a good friend of mine, he actually became my brother-in-law, eventually suggested engineering. And at the time, that was simple. Okay, fine, I did that. Next thing I knew, I was 5 years of engineering under my belt. And it was a good time to be studying engineering. I think it's a better time now because engineering runs the world in a lot of ways. But anyway, so I came out of school and I wasn't quite ready for the workforce. I did some interning, I did some co-oping. Those are all good programs. So I had a little experience, but I was a lousy engineer as far as I could tell. So I got an opportunity to travel, but then I went back into grad school and got an MBA, which in my eyes, I was blessed by a professor who at the time could see the benefits of an engineer with a sense of business. And the irony is, all through engineering school, we picked fights with business students because we thought we were better than them. But in the end, as my father one time said, it's the business guy who hires the engineer. And so I got a business degree as well. And that really put me in a good position. And as I mentioned, I did some traveling. I biked around Europe for a summer, which taught me a lot about myself, as well as travel and taking on new challenges. I had the benefit of growing up as being the Midwest, coming out of Milwaukee, which is my hometown. You could travel around America, which we did in an old beat up station wagon, and see the country and realize you can leave Milwaukee and go other places and survive. And so I came out of school and pure luck, somebody called me out of the blue and offered me an opportunity with a company at Texas Instruments at the time. And I had a couple of requirements. You know, I'm an engineer. Okay, I wanted a company that was technology based, well respected, well known. TI, as we call it, TI had a good reputation. It obviously a heavy driven engineering company. On the other hand, they had some of the worst sales and marketing experiences because they were engineering driven. So it was a great time to go to Texas Instruments. Nobody could second guess me because there weren't that many people there who weren't engineers or who had a business degree. So that got me started, and then I moved out of Milwaukee, and it's a great place to be from. In fact, I was just there over the 4th of July, and it's still a lot of fun in the summertime. But you know, I never looked back after. The funny thing was, I went to Texas Instruments in Massachusetts and New England, and I was there mostly in marketing, and got into sales. Somebody suggested to me one day out of the blue, hey, you know, you might make a good salesman. Which, being an engineer, never wanted to be a sales guy. All I could think of is used car salesman. And this, no offense to used car salesmen, because I respect them now. But at the time, I thought, oh my God, I don't want to be a sales guy. And yet I took the chance. And that's something I think, you know, somewhere along the line, I learned about, hey, if it's a reasonable challenge, it's a reasonable, meaning what's the worst that can happen? Go on, take the chance and see where it goes. So I moved into sales, and that made me a better marketing person when I went back. And you know, at the time, and you know, okay, I was a middle career, I suppose you call it, and I was getting a little frustrated. And again, another person came up to me and gave me some good advice. Said, hey, you know, you may not be thrilled to be a mid-level marketing guy at Texas Instruments, but his words, and some of these, they always haunt me as being too simplistic, but it was, you know, bloom where you're planted. Now, if you picture the guy who told me that, those words come out of his mouth did not, you know, he'd always been kind of a hard-bitten kind of guy, and here he's talking about flowers that bloom where you're planted. But the interesting thing was, you know, the message I took was, okay, maybe this isn't the perfect place I want to be in, and maybe I'd like to be someplace else. But do the best job you can while you're here. And people noticed, you know, and next thing I know, somebody else came along and took a chance on me, partly because of that attitude that, hey, I may not, you know, this may not be the place to be, but I do a good job. And moved me into operations for a while. And that was an eye opener. I mean, when you're in sales and marketing, you can kind of say what you want because you leave, it's expected a little bit. You know, I'm in marketing, I'm in sales. But when you're in operations, it gets a lot different. And that, to me, that was one of the hardest jobs I ever had, dealing with people on a daily basis. And you become part of their, you know, you hear their problems, you hear everything about their families, and you're still trying to get work done. But it was a good experience. And then out of the blue, I got a call to another company that was headquartered back in Milwaukee. And, you know, it might be fun to work for that company. Again, it was out on the East Coast, but I could go back to Milwaukee and visit my family on company time, as they would say. And so I did that for a few years. And at the same time, I kept my, I wanted to work international because the world's getting smaller. And if you don't understand, you know, especially in our industries, industrial, aerospace, even defense in some ways, if you don't understand what's going on outside your local office, you missed an opportunity. So I got, you know, I'd done a good job in marketing and some program management, and luck would have it, my boss became responsible for a company over in England, and you know, and he was one who couldn't relate to the British, so he asked if I would. And so I went over with my family for a couple of years and had a nice time, big experience, broadened my horizons, and that opened up other doors for me. And again, it was a challenge. You know, do you want to move your family to England or anywhere? It was a reasonable challenge. I mean, it was a certain risk, I suppose. Who knows what happens? When it came time to coming back, we ended up in California, which probably wasn't my wife's plan, but it was an acceptable plan. The kids loved it. And so here we are in California. And I had worked in large corporations for most of my career. and an opportunity. I said, next time I move, I want to move to a smaller company, a little flatter organization, and the opportunity arose. And I'm in a relatively, it's CCS, Custom Control Sensors, privately held company. It's been under the same general family for 60 years. The owner is my boss, and it's a very flat organization. So that got me here. And the pandemic tossed a few curves at us, but eventually, and one of the reasons I came here, again, similar like when I went to Texas Instruments, the interview, the owner said, I really don't know much about sales and marketing. And I thought, great. You won't be second guessing me necessarily. I don't have to worry. Yeah. Well, I suddenly became the smartest guy in the room when it came to sales and marketing. That doesn't happen in a big corporation where you have a lot of layers, a lot of people second guessing or telling you this or that. And your idea is, okay, you have to please. You can't please everybody all the time.
Right.
Here, it's a lot easier to please. I only have to please one or two people, and I'm okay with that. So that's one of the attractions of a smaller business.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have a very storied career, going around and with travel and not just from a geographic standpoint, but also just from different departments. Obviously, going from marketing to sales, you see that you see that pretty common, or sales to marketing. But ops is definitely it's where the rubber meets the road right there, and that's when the ops guys start yelling at the salespeople like, "What the hell did you just sell? We can't do
what
this."
were you thinking?
Yeah.
And I remind him that nothing in a company happens until something is sold.
True.
The rest of you guys can all just sit around until the sales guy produces. You're all support. Granted, to your point, once I sell something, man, I'm hoping the operations guy believes me.
Yeah.
It makes it happen.
That's always I don't know what you're talking about there. We've never run into that here. So, but so I'm curious. You said that you engineering. What kind of engineering were you? Did you study?
Well, I started out as a biomedical engineer because I had great dreams. No, the funny thing is, I had great dreams of designing and making artificial limbs. But I found out that the school I was going to, their definition of biomedical engineering was essentially pre-med, which I could not see myself as a doctor. So electrical engineering was a huge overlap between, in fact, if you walk into an operating room today, it's more of an electrical engineer than it is a doctor in some ways. I mean, now they have, the doctor drives the robot that does the surgery. So I went into electrical engineering and stuck it out. I'd still be there if it wasn't for some good friends and some fraternity brothers that helped me out in tough times. I'm not a very good engineer, but I get the concept.
Well, it sounds like that's helped a lot, though. I mean, obviously, it's very difficult to get into a very getting into technical sales or anything. Obviously, and when you're at TI. From a marketing standpoint, being able to relate to the audience, or you're depending on who you're selling to, certainly you're going to likely be selling to other engineers, and there's other stakeholders involved there. But being able to at least somewhat talk the same lingo, helps tremendously. And then obviously in operations, I mean that's kind of a given. But
you're absolutely right. I mean, to be able to walk into somebody and have a technical. All right, one of my focuses was I want a technical product. When I interviewed with companies, or when I looked at a company, I would look at the product. Is it technical? Are they a leader in the marketplace? Are they well respected and have a great quality reputation? And those are kind of the three deciding factors. I mean, it doesn't matter where they were located because I move around and it didn't matter a lot of other stuff. But if it was a good technical product, well made, highly reliable, and good quality reputation, that makes my job as a sales and marketing person all the easier.
Yeah. So well, like throughout your career, you talked about, that there were people that came in and approached you and said, hey, you'd be good in sales, or hey, maybe you should, or hey, do you want to go to, move your family to England and help, what's one person or moment maybe that comes to mind that really you think had a big impact? I know there's probably multiple most of the time, but what's one that stands out?
Well, probably one of my first bosses, Ed Ionati. I'll always remember, because one is he took a big shot. He took a big chance on me. He was willing to look at someone who and bring them into an organization and stand behind me and give me some sense of direction, and at the same time freedom to do what I wanted to do and to learn, to fall, and to trip a little bit. Nothing fatal, but and he also taught me that I can have a relationship with my boss where it wasn't all one way. That he would actually ask me what I thought and use my opinion. And here I was, kind of a rookie, newbie, whatever you want to call him, and he taught me early on that everyone has an idea, and in my position now, I'd say I'm more of a consensus. I'll sit in a meeting and try to draw the quiet ones out, because they probably have good ideas that they're just overwhelmed by the other ones.
Yeah.
And but that was one of the things that taught me about listening to the people, working with the people under you, as I don't yet like to use that term, but that was one. He was a big one, took a shot at me, and so did Ray Tarangela, who gave me the operations job. I mean, here I'm a sales guy, a marketing guy. I had very little, if any, operational experience, and he said, "No, I'll take a shot on that." And he taught me more about operations. Again, he kind of said, "Here's the basics. Just make sure." He taught me early on when Kaizen was new, when using Kanban was new. He taught me that we had people running presses, and they spent more time with that press than they did with their spouse. And I was, hey, but when you went up and said, take care of that like you want, do what you want to do to it, all of a sudden the place cleaned up and it ran smooth. So again, he was the kind of guy that opened up and said, give it a shot, give it a try. There aren't any bad ideas except the ones you don't try.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. So I'm just curious, your day to day now, obviously, it's a little different. What's a typical, I know I didn't ask you this, I didn't say this ahead of time, so I'm throwing you a curveball, but I'm just,
Yeah, it's fine.
What's your kind of typical day to day look like?
I wouldn't say it's real regular, but you usually come in and you check I check the emails, see if any disasters. I have I got the smartphone, so I know if something goes haywire overnight, I'll probably hear about it before I get here. But first of all, it's a very good team here. And so, and if you let them do their job, more often than not, they'll do the job. So I come in, I'll check the emails, I'll scan if anyone looks like a crisis, that might be one I focus on. I try to get all my meetings in the morning. One of the benefits of, if there's such a thing as a benefit for a pandemic, was video conferencing, because I can sit in my office, I can be in a meeting, I can be doing some other things if it's not me that needs to contribute. I can get people who, trying to get people in a conference room sometimes. One is first getting them there, and second is at the end of the meeting they want to sit around and shoot the breeze. The beauty of a video conference, you can turn it off and go on to something else. Right. So I'll do that in the morning. I have a number of projects that we're working on. I wouldn't say that some of them are creative, some of them are longer term. I try to put those in the afternoon. I go out and I believe in management by walking around, which is kind of well worn at this point, but get out and just talk to people, say hi, what's new, how does that thing work, what's it do, how's your day going? I think the people that work in this building, they like to know that the upper management is around, is participating. Sometimes you help somebody out, somebody complained about the air conditioner not working. I'm sure they told the maintenance guy, hey, the air conditioner isn't working. But, if I see the maintenance guy and I suggest maybe you might want to check that guy's air conditioner, he'll do it. And, the people appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that's my day. And then usually I check emails before I leave too, in case I missed any, and wrap it up. And I try not to take work home. That's why I come here. And, I travel, and I haven't traveled in a while, but I like to travel. So then that's a little, when I do travel, that's a little more chaotic. But again, and we'll see how that goes at post-pandemic, how travel goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the pandemic and everything, I'm just curious for your organization, what the things did you like? How much of an impact did it have for you, and what have you learned from it?
The biggest thing, well, one of the biggest things is it blew us out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
This I would call this CCS is in some ways it was old school. You came, you worked from 6 to 2, whatever. You're at your desk, and suddenly, and we have a large engineering staff. We have sales and marketing and production control, and suddenly, California was probably a little aggressive in some of their mandates. Which, suddenly you couldn't go to work, and we scrambled. And next thing you know, within a relatively short time, most people were up and running from home. And I was impressed. I mean, our IT gentleman, Rod, just did an outstanding job wiring us and getting us up. And Henry, our CEO, was also very accommodating to say, whatever it takes, let's get it set up, make the people comfortable. And we did a good job of sanitizing the company or the plant and getting people back in relatively quickly. With one is, we're proud of this. There were no transmission cases of COVID in the company. We were up and running within a couple of weeks after the original shutdown. We've kept it clean. Masks. Yeah, we finally just stopped wearing masks. If you're vaccinated, now you don't have to wear a mask. So it was amazing how fast we moved from at your desk 9 to 5 to working remotely and Zoom meetings and WebExes, and we kept it going.
Yeah.
And I think that taught us that we can be flexible. I mean, now people are, hey, can I work remote from work? Can I work remote today? Well, we don't necessarily encourage or discourage it, but it's an option that we didn't have before. And so that was great. I mean, it taught us that we could recover, and it taught us that we could be a little more flexible with people and their work environments. On the other hand, in some ways, I consider the pandemic a bit of a speed bump in our business. The aerospace business was booming in 2019 into 2020. Industrial was doing fine, and all of a sudden, it's amazing how you think you've planned and projected and forecast everything, and didn't see that one coming. That one came around, and and in some ways, though, that speed bump helped us catch up on some things. It helped us work on some projects that, because things slowed down, we could work on some things that we were putting on the back burner. It got some other projects kick started because e-commerce and digital marketing. It suddenly taught you how important digital marketing and e-commerce is, because you couldn't go out to people. You could call them on the phone, but so that it jump started a few of those programs as well. So I don't want to see another pandemic, but I could find some silver lining on that cloud.
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's a story that we've heard over and over again. Obviously, yes, there were nobody wants to go through that again. We don't have to, but certainly silver linings in terms of what being able to learn. Obviously, the flexibility is a piece that we hear a lot of. It's always interesting though hearing about different impacts. I mean, you hear we deal with a lot of companies in the material handling space, and that was like I mean, just they're still going nuts, and talk about accelerating business and just. But then everyone's dealing with supply chain issues still. Relative to just labor and resiliency. I mean, just the whole 9 yards. So
I don't think we've seen the end of it.
I don't think so. I unfortunately I agree with you. There's, I mean, some of it I think it's self-induced. Other stuff is just things are still running its course. So that being said, from challenges that you see in the industry right now, what are the things that you're seeing that you see on the horizon? Whether they may have already been here pre-COVID or maybe not. What are you seeing?
From a change in the way our industry works.
Yeah, in the industry, the way that it works, or yeah.
Well, and when you say industry, I mean, I see myself as kind of a foot. Our customers' industry is probably more important. I mean, my industry in sensors and switches and measurements, that's always going to be important because sensors are the fingertips of the internet. It's the sensors that are the eyes and ears of the machine and the systems that they run. So, and they become more so as people found out. Hey, I can't always depend on people being here, so robotics isn't more important. Automation is important, and we've embraced that here as well. I see that our business in terms of sensors and switches pretty solid going forward, as long as you're got the right types of switches and sensors. As far as industry goes, I think everyone appreciates the supply chain a whole lot more than they did a year and a half ago. And I've seen a few industries kind of back off the pressure for, it used to be low price.
Yep.
Suddenly now it's more, is it a good value? I've always preached, we're a good value. We're not the least expensive. We never will be. Probably not the most expensive, but we're going to give you the value you're looking for. And I think this whole pandemic has made people like the aerospace industry and energy and power and oil and gas a little bit more respective of, this company it provides the support, it gives me a good value, it gives me a good product, they're there when I need them. So I think you're going to see a little less pressure on the cost, and a little bit more on what, are you there? You've seen the move from back to from foreign supply to domestic supply.
Yeah.
That's not going to go away until somebody starts to say, hey, can I get it cheaper somewhere else? And hopefully somebody will say, but remember what might happen. Remember what happened the last time.
Yeah.
And I also see some larger companies reaching out financially, supporting some of the supply base, because they put the supply base at risk with their cost cutting. And then all of a sudden the demand disappeared, but you can't make an airplane without certain parts. So now, the aerospace industry has to carry some suppliers to keep them in business. I don't think they like that, but they realize that we have to make sure that our supply base is financially viable, even in a certain risk environment, God forbid another pandemic. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, just the interdependability across everything relative to supply chain. You look at globalization and just how, the impact there. There's a lot to unpack. I think the whole question around lean manufacturing to certain, as you mentioned, is kind of being re-looked at and saying, well, okay, maybe we pushed that a little too far now.
Leaned it out a little too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You get and aerospace, I'm a pilot. Yeah, you lean too much of your fuel to air mixture, and you're going to lose an engine. So we can't go too lean, So.
That reminds me, I was going to tell you, you're a pilot. My one of the things that happened during the pandemic was one of my children started flight school. So
awesome. That is very cool. They get the pilot's license yet, or?
Not yet. He's about halfway there. The goal is to be a commercial pilot someday, so we'll see where that goes.
That's exciting. Well, as a side, and I'm not exactly sure. Obviously, COVID messed with things up a little bit, but there was a big pilot shortage coming up in 2028. I think was supposed to be the peak. I don't know now. I'm assuming it. Well, it probably is still there.
It hasn't changed a whole lot. So I mean, one of the and I'm not a pilot, so I don't have to worry about retiring at 65.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
pilots were still changing. They were still retiring, and they turned 65 during the pandemic. They had to retire, and
Yeah.
so granted, demand is maybe down a little bit, but in some ways, the airlines are lucky that they could. They weren't making new pilots either at the time. I mean, so the pilots were retiring, but you weren't replenishing the pool, and now suddenly the pool's kind of low, and it's not just pilots, it's flight attendants, it's maintenance, a lot of other stuff.
Absolutely.
And that's impacting the industry as well. I would like to think in the next 5 years that they will get that together, but and
You never
I think
know.
that- I
You know,
think you see that.
I would think so, but then, to your previous comment that you made earlier, just the way that we're doing business now and being more open and adapt to video conferencing, for example, go-to-market strategies. I know there's a big question right now in terms of business travel, and I imagine that I'm assuming, I'm sure it affects you guys as well and what you're thinking. But I'm hearing from just a lot of companies have you can travel now. But a lot of people are like, you know what? I don't know that I necessarily need to from a business standpoint. Maybe I don't need to travel all over the place for all these meetings. I can do this over Zoom versus. So it'll be interesting, I think, to see what that impact.
You got a very good point. I mean, the airlines certainly want business back, but even like we've learned, or I've learned, that we won't always be able to get out to that person, so we have to find more ways for them to find us.
Yeah, exactly.
Go back to that digital marketing, the whole idea of helping people find you and make it easy to find and easy to buy, easy to do business with. And once they find you, can they buy your product? And so we've obviously pushed in that direction, so that not only are we easy to find, but we're easy to buy. It's easy to buy our product. But that's the leverage that I try to tell my salespeople and marketing people is, you used to have to get in the car and drive to these meetings around the city. But if you do this right and you do it well, you could stay in your office and do twice as many introductory meetings, meet and greets. Hi, is there an interest here? Can we get together? And we've learned to do that with larger corporations too. I mean, if I can now address a number of engineers while they're at their desk and say, hey, would you want to join for this WebEx? Let me just talk to you about it. And if there's an interest, I'll be happy to jump on a plane and come up and see you.
Right.
But I can talk to 5 or 10 of you in an hour, whereas I can only talk to 2 or 3 of you in a day after I travel all the way up there. So, I see the benefits of the video conferencing, the digital marketing, the e-commerce. And maybe that'll make the business travel all that much more efficient and effective, because I still believe eventually, customers would like to see the person from time to time.
Yeah.
You can always do better in person.
100%.
I believe your father was a salesman or is a salesperson, and so the selling job hasn't gone away. How you go about it, obviously, is changing a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. And it will, and I'm sure it'll continue to evolve, and it'll oscillate and go back and forth.
Yeah.
It was an interesting observation, or I think, and I'm kind of an interesting tangent too. Talking about getting into the whole pilot thing, but it worked. It worked. So Paul, one last question I want to ask, and again, I didn't send this to you because I like asking people this off the cuff. So get ready for the last curveball. Sorry.
Right.
And that is, what are you doing to, as a leader of your organization to kind of stay, on top of your game?
Okay. One is I'm not sure I'm ever on top of my game because I'm still learning so much every day. And new things come up every day that you think, where did that come from? But one of the things is, I like to read. So I've been reading leadership books just in articles because a lot of people have gone before me, have done a good job at being leaders. And so you can learn from their ways. The other thing is I've also learned, communicate more. I often believe, and this is somebody told me long ago, and I thought she was pretty smart, said, if you give the same information to a number of people, reasonable people, rational people, they'll probably all come to pretty much the same agreement or consensus. And I find that's true. If you take the time, you communicate, you tell them what you want to do, you tell them the outcome you'd like to have, you give them the same data that you got, generally they're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense, let's do it. And I've learned to do that a lot more in this position because there's so many different things going on that if you kind of talk the main point, the main direction, the main things we want to get done here, the people want, that most people are good at heart. They want to get it done. They want to do the right thing, and they'll try to do what you want done. You don't have to micromanage them. You set the general direction. We want to have good products. We want to be fair with people. We want to be reasonable. And you want to treat people like you want to be treated. I'm trying to keep putting that into practice and lead by example too. So yeah, reading how other people have done it, communicating like crazy, explaining, and setting examples. Those are probably the three best things I can come up with.
That's fantastic. No, that's great. Any books in particular that you've come across that stand? They're like, hey, this is awesome.
Well, two or three come to mind. One of them is that I just finished a book on leadership it talked about Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, and Lyndon Johnson. Who I lived during some of their times. But I never thought of it that way, but it talked about how they went through certain crises and came out and they forged their leadership qualities and got through. But the book I am reading right now, believe it or not, and I mentioned I was from Milwaukee, is Instant Replay by Jerry Kramer about the 1967 Packers season under Vince Lombardi. And I'm learning about Vince Lombardi leadership style. I'm not saying he was always right, but he certainly won games.
He certainly did, and that's awesome. That's fantastic. My wife is from Minneapolis, so we won't get into anything there. So
I live in Minneapolis. Part of my wanderings, I've lived in Minneapolis, and it's a wonderful city, except in January and February.
Yeah.
But no, it really good for you. And you know what? The people up there are super. I mean, I had come from the East Coast to the Midwest, back to the Midwest, and I didn't realize the type of people and the quality of people in Minnesota. So, other than the Vikings, everything's great.
other than the Vikings, yeah, that's what I hear. There's a little bit of little bit of that I've picked up on. So, anyways, no, well, Paul, listen, we could probably go on for like 3 hours. This has been really just interesting and fascinating, learning more about you.
Thank you. I love your questioning. I love your questions.
No, this has been good. So, for those who'd like to learn more about you, like to learn more about CCS, what's sort of the best way that they can check you guys out?
We have our website address is CCS Dual Snap, all one word, long but one word, ccsdualsnap.com. We're always looking for advice on how to do better, but that's the first place to go.
Excellent. Well,
certainly encourage people to check it out.
Well, we'll make sure that all the information is in the show notes and accessible, throughout the video, so people want to check you out. They certainly can.
Okay.
So, Paul, thank you, and
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and we'll wrap.
Keep up the good work, by the way. I love your show.
I will. Thanks so much. All right, well, that wraps up today's Industrial Sage Executive Series interview with Paul Conrath, who is the president of Custom Control Solutions. Got that right. You can go to ccsdualsnap.com, check them out. The information will be in the show notes. Thank you for watching or listening. If you're not subscribed, I highly recommend going to the website and getting on our email list, because you're missing out on great content like this. And there's more and more and more coming out every single day. So I'll be back next week with another episode on the Executive Series. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Get notified every time there's a new episode by signing up for our email newsletters. You can also subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review so more industrial professionals can find us. Want us to tell your story? Go to industrialsage.com. This week's episode was produced by Rika Wiersma, Filmed and edited by Optimum Productions, and our executive producer is Danny Gonzalez. Thank you for watching Industrial Sage.